Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this first event or panel discussion organized by Parimal and Pramod Chaudhary Center for Learning and Teaching. Before we begin this panel discussion, let me give you a brief introduction to our center. So, this is a new center in IIT Bombay, started with generous donation from Mr. Pramod Chaudhary, who is one of our distinguished alumni, and he is CEO of Praj Industries in Pune. So, through his donation, this center has started, but soon this will be part of the academic ecosystem of IIT Bombay. One of the main aim of this center is to uh, disseminate and enhance pedagogical practices in the institute. So, our aim is to interact with faculty, particularly with young faculty, with new faculty who are joining the system. Try to create an environment by which we can transfer some of the tricks of the trade from senior faculty to the junior faculty to the new faculty about teaching and teaching methodologies. Also, invite experts from outside to get us, new inputs, get us trained on teaching methodologies, teaching practices. Recently, if you might have received this mail regarding a workshop that was conducted by Professor Freud on effective teaching methods. So now, in continuation with this, we are organizing these series of two panel discussions. Now, the center is not only going to work with faculty of institute. We are also going to be doing some programs directly for the students. One of the programs that we are thinking of is on how to make maths learning effective for students and so on. And there are many other things on cards, like training students who aspire to be faculty on how to teach, how to conduct research, and so on. So, certification programs for graduating PhD students or postdoc students on how to teach effectively or how to be a faculty, how to be a. So, we also have external activities, not just internal for IIT Bombay. So recently, director has agreed that TechWhip project, which is running for through help of World Bank, for bringing many institutes in the north of India, many engineering institutes in the north of India, okay, improving their quality. It's a quality improvement program, and IIT is playing a role of mentor to many of these institutes. And now this program is being executed through our center, PPCCLT. So we have two spheres of activities, one internal for our faculty, for our students, and other is external. This is for students and faculty of institutes outside IIT Bombay. Soon we will be launching our web page, and a lot of resources will become available. In particular, the workshops that we conducted, it was a Freud's workshop. Entire recording will be made available to all faculty inside and also outside. So we plan to have a YouTube channel in which we want to host all these videos. So this material will be available for both for IIT fraternity and also outside. So with this brief introduction about the center, let me say a few words about this panel discussion that we thought of organizing. As you must might have noticed that over the last few years, uh, IRCC organizes interaction sessions with faculty members who receive research awards. So on a similar lines, where students and faculty get chance to interact with this award-winning faculty, on a similar lines, this is an attempt to create an interface between faculty who have been awarded the Professor S.P. Sukhatme Teaching Award for this year and subsequently every year with the students and faculty of IIT Bombay. So it would be interesting to know uh, what ways they adopt to handle teaching challenges in IIT Bombay. The teaching challenges in IIT Bombay are becoming increasingly more and more complex as the numbers are growing and the demands are changing. So we would like to hear from our peers uh, who have been successful in transferring uh, knowledge to the students. This is in some way a students award. It's based on students' feedback. Uh, so, with this brief introduction, I would like to invite today's panelist, Professor Atre. Professor Milind Atre is from Mechanical Engineering. Professor Vishwanathan from Metallurgy and Material Science. Professor Raja Mohanty from IDC. Professor Vikram Gadre from Electrical Engineering. And Professor Kandan Iyer from Mechanical Engineering. So total of 13 faculty members are available for these panel discussions. And in today's discussion, 5 faculty members have agreed to participate. We have another session scheduled next Wednesday when 8 more award-winning faculty have agreed to participate and discuss about their secrets of teaching. So, in the beginning, let me congratulate all of you for receiving this prestigious award in the Institute. And the format that we intend to follow is to request each faculty colleague to express his views on teaching challenges and his or her way of handling those challenges in, say, 8 to 10 minutes. After that, we'll have an open house, open session to discuss about different questions that you may have. So let me begin with Professor Atre.
So, good afternoon. And let me first thank the center for having us invited over here. I congratulate all the faculty members, faculty colleagues who got this award. And in brief, try to tell what I think about my teaching abilities or the challenges that I face and how do I possibly try to overcome. And I'll say first of all that I joined this institute just 12 years back. However, my experience as a researcher could possibly be beneficial for my teaching purposes. And so I will highlight in short about my experience of learning first and then sort of disseminating my knowledge to the students. So I specialize in thermal part of mechanical engineering and I teach thermodynamics, advanced thermodynamics, refrigeration, air conditioning, cryogenic engineering, so on and so forth, applied thermodynamics in the earlier part of my teaching. However, after my PhD, right from IIT Bombay, I have worked for 14 years before I came into teaching. And this actually gave me a phenomenal amount of confidence, exposure, and this 14 years of my stay in various companies and research institute, including 2 years in TRDDC, Tata Research Development and Design Center, 3 years postdoc in a university in Germany, 5 years in atomic energy in Rajaramana Center for Advanced Technology, and 5 years in Oxford Instruments in Oxford to work at different developmental technologies, R&D institutions, at the same time develop units, hardware, and not only develop the hardware but talk to the user community also and to the respective changes in an equipment which costs around 10 crore one unit cost 10 crore. So that was an MRI machine, for example, which was I was working for 5 6 years. Now this makes a huge impact for my understanding, and that brings about some changes in teaching methodology also. Uh, I believe that this experience of dealing with various equipment brings a big change in me. While talking to students in mechanical engineering, unlike electrical engineering where current is not available to see, we can at least show the students what is the compressor, heat exchanger, pumps, etc. are. So they can actually have a look at hardwares that we try to design, we try to use in various capacities. So normally I deal with examples mostly around in our house, for example, refrigerator, automobile, a two-stroke engine, a car, for example, a microwave that we have in the house, and try to give examples of those units whenever I'm talking about thermodynamics, heat transfer related aspects in these subjects. What I believe, in addition to this experience, is very, very important for me is to have a storytelling attitude. This storytelling business is very important, I believe, for teachers. So actually, one should be able to sort of teach through a story, and also try during the storytelling some kind of imagination that student possibly try to see all those equipment around them. So if I'm trying to tell them about a refrigerator at home, at the same time I will try to imagine what will happen if your refrigerator is kept horizontal, if not vertical. Now suddenly I can see that student even in second year start imagining that they have possibly never seen a domestic refrigerator kept in a horizontal condition. Now I try to imagine and throw a challenge to them, saying that will it work? Will it cool? Because a housewife may be very short, may not be able to reach the freezer on the top. But what will happen if the refrigerator is kept completely in a horizontal position and you can actually access every corner of it? But from thermodynamics point of view, from heat transfer point of view, will it work? Now, here in students who have seen refrigerator right from their childhood start imagining what will happen if the refrigerator is kept in a horizontal condition. They can see advantages, but they can't possibly extend their imagination to it to see what will happen technically. And this is what this story will possibly lead to some kind of imagination. And then will actually can extend it further to have some challenges in front of them. If it works, why it works. If it doesn't work, what are the reasons that it doesn't work? All these things are very important. Also, I add the same thing that when you leave your house for 10 days, you never make your refrigerator off condition. It always remains on. Why? But at the same time, I will not keep a washing machine running all through for 10 days, for example, or other device like microwave or something like that. So what is the consumption of a refrigerator as compared to other things? These are the questions which students actually never know the answer. The digital answer they never know. But these are the conditions, these are the stories I can ask and make them actually think about what could possibly answers be to such conditions. Other than that, I know what are my weaknesses and what are my strengths. My weakness is my board work is not very good, and I've seen fantastic board work done by various professors in IIT. So I try to compensate that using my slides. So I use perfect animation. I got a lot of students who do and help me with animation. I got very colorful animation, and I can actually make animation by click of the slide and make a entire storytelling using those animation. And I have used that phenomenally very well in most of my courses. But knowing that I am weak at certain things, and therefore, even if I have practiced and I have started teaching at the age of 40 plus, I cannot suddenly start becoming very very good at certain things which I possibly have never used in my earlier days. Second and last thing I'll say, and before I go in the details of various things, the important thing is to have dialogue. So right in the first 2 minutes, I start asking questions to the student. This is a very important thing that you start developing a dialogue with the student. So right from the early, in first 2 or 3 minutes, start asking question, maybe about the last class, or about something that they are dealing with. For example, I am teaching a very boring part of a very advanced thermodynamics when I am talking about kinetic theory. When I teach kinetic theory, I have to talk about atoms and molecular collisions, which possibly none of them can realize, can imagine. So I have to talk about the fattest class student in the class and the thinnest student in the class, and maybe make them stand and think about having a collision. and how the momentum get transferred and leading to pressure and force and all those things. So can we take some live example and create some interest? Because otherwise the atoms and molecules and the collision and transfer of momentum become so boring in a class that students just go on writing the equations and just accept whatever you tell them. But instead of that, if you kind of make a story around the live members in the class, that helps a lot. Last thing I'll add, and before I hand it over to everybody, I make a lot of stress on visiting industries. So one of the visits is to my lab where they can see most of the equipment. And second thing, I in a course where I talk about gas liquefaction, gas separation, and all that thing, I take them to Linde, an industry which is nearby in Mumbai, which takes around 2 hours. I have to work very hard towards managing such a tour, having taught everything to them in a given time that I have. But I have developed a very good rapport with the industry around, and more or less, most of them are happy to have us there. Not only that, they invite us, but they feed us for a lunch also at the end of the day. And this I am doing almost for last 10 years. So this visit is very, very successful. Students at the end of the day, when they see whatever they have learned in the class, when they see that everything is working the way I have taught in the class, it gives a lot of satisfaction, and actually they can relate all the theory that they have understood, consisting of so many equations and all that thing, actually getting related to the industry on the ground. And ultimately that brings a real fulfillment of understanding that yes, this is not only the bookish knowledge, but this is something we practiced in the field also. So these are the few techniques that I say I use. The challenges are plenty. 8:30 class is always a challenge, but I'm sure everybody of us face those challenges. I'll not go in the details of that. I think, thank you very much. I'll stop here.
No, actually, I'll introduce the clip. It so happens that when I was a student here, my final project happened to be a short film on education, and I'll take the liberty to play a small clip out of the film, and then I'll continue to share whatever. So about 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I'll just, if you permit me, I just need to play it from.
सब यार अपने सबके दिलों में अरमाए हैं के दिलों में अरमाए है वो जिंदगी में कल क्या बनेगा हर एक नजर का सपना ये है कोई इंजीनियर का काम करेगा बिजनेस में कोई अपना नाम करेगा मगर ये तो कोई न जाने कि मेरी मंजिल है कहाँ पापा कहते हैं बड़ा नाम करेगा
It's an 18-minute film which was my final project when I was student here. We'll share a little bit about how the film was actually shot in Kendriya Vidyalaya. When I wanted to understand the situation of education in our schools and so on. And just a small anecdote, it turns out that one of the children in that film later was a student when I was showing the film to students here, and she recognized herself and she said, "Oh, that's me." So that was very interesting. So I would think that for me, when I was a student, there was also a visitor to IIT who is, I think, one of the most significant voices of our time, which was Jiddu Krishnamurthy. And his views on education have often really shaped my approach to teaching. For example, one sentence that I remember of Krishnamurthy is one where he says that in order to understand any problem, it is best if one begins without an end in mind, so that you can go into it in a very open-minded sort of a manner. So you don't have an answer that you want to prove, so to speak. So that and the other ideas, I have spent a little bit of time in the years that after the years that I graduated in a school that was started by Krishnamurthy, and I think there is a lot I draw from my approaches in interacting with students from certain ideas that he has written about extensively. For example, one idea that he often speaks of is one has to be free from fear in order to learn. So to use reward and punishment to teach is not a good idea, therefore I have learned from. And therefore, even our chief guest the other day mentioned that he asked his daughter about what's a good teacher, and the definition according to his daughter was a person who treats the students like human beings. So that's in some sense one of my secrets, perhaps, that though as class sizes grow bigger and we have people who are coached in some sense to expect certain things from IIT. They have clearer goals of why they want to come to IIT, and it's often just for the brand that they want to come. These are, of course, the crises that we all that we all face. But at the same time, to try, in spite of the larger numbers and students who at times appear a little burnt out by the time they come here, to remember the earlier tenets which are the core of good teaching, is perhaps the kind of secret that have helped me in my own association with students here. And the other thought, which I will echo from what Milind said, where he said that his research often informs his teaching, his own learning. For me to find something of interest to do in my own life after 15 years of being here is very important. And for example, I have initiated an activity which seems a little puzzling in the IIT environment, which is the activity of handloom weaving. Of course, it's related to design, our core discipline. But in an IIT setup, handloom weaving sounds like very old-fashioned technology, perhaps. But to me, the handmade has been of great interest, particularly in societies which are moving towards artificial intelligence, and that shall certainly shape large parts of the future. But at the same time, I feel there is a significant role that the handmade has to play in the lives of future societies, where people by choice will come back to the handmade. I have a hunch of that kind. And when I have a hunch, I try and, let's say, offer a course, and I have, interestingly, students from the engineering stream signing up for weaving courses, coming and weaving on the handloom, which is a great variation from the normal courses that they do. Perhaps it's very nice that IIT in some sense broadens its educational areas so that we also offer what is called as a liberal base, a liberal education base along with the technical education which happens. That perhaps, and yesterday when Ramadurai was here, I had a question for him and he answered very interesting. I said, but we can't hire a master weaver in IIT today because the chap doesn't have a degree. And he said that now you're an institute of eminence, you can think of ways of hiring, master weavers. So I think I see that, how do we balance the digital age with things that are more tactile, with offerings to students, not necessarily from IDC alone, as minor courses and institute electives, to students from all departments so that they have an all-rounded growth and so on. So I'll stop here with these observations. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon to all of you. I'm Kannan Iyer. In fact, I think nowadays I think he has also talked about artificial intelligence, and I think basically I store all my mails in Google. And it so turns out, at least last couple of days, what I have found is the department had asked me that we should do something about upgradation of labs. And I find the next day a mail pops up with a company saying that they are offering all kind of experimental gadgets for education. And similarly, there was a mail from Sachin yesterday that there's going to be a meeting here and a talk. And I saw, usually when I go back after this, I just open YouTube, and when I open YouTube, there was a suggestion how to speak. So these are very strange coincidences. So I just clicked on, okay, what the hell, let me see how to speak, because tomorrow I've got to, see, normally, we are all in, say, an engineering department where we have something specific to talk, and, we just go, as a matter of fact, we go and tell that, at least that's what I do. So, but then the YouTube said, no, you have to start with a story. That's exactly what Milind was talking about. I hope he has not seen that YouTube, but it looks like you have to start with a story first so that, you catch the people. For example, you should give some startling facts. For example, there was which said that, for example, in 2 minutes of the sun's energy is more than the entire energy we have consumed over so many decades or whatever, the entire human being. So it seems this is true. At the moment, I have not verified it. So what I'm saying is you're supposed to start. Then I see Raja giving a film, which is basically picking you up, I think maybe the first thing which is being suggested is you basically go after and get a mood for people to listen to you. That is probably the first thing as a teacher you are supposed to do, or as a public speaker you are expected to do. Okay, now since the topic which was given is what were the challenges and what exactly you have done, so I just went back and looked at as an engineering problem, okay, what is it I should do? Then I have just come up with some 3 or 4 basic points. So particularly what I found is, what's the difference between, I joined in 86, so maybe 3 decades are over of that order. And you see the IIT has been constantly evolving, which is what one expects IIT to evolve. For example, in say between 85 and 95, if you see, the only way the students of IITs who wanted to get to top of their career or whatever, they were to go for academic studies abroad. So they want to go for masters, PhD, and so the courses were taken very seriously those days. So it was very easy for you to talk highly technical and be coherent, and everything worked. Then say between 95 to 2005, maybe slowly as the IT boom started working, the people figured out that there is nothing much to learn because what these guys are going to do is they have to only understand certain software and then they will go in that direction. So the interest starts dwindling. So therefore, obviously you've got to change the style of what you have got to do. And then finally, when you look, for example, in the last 10 years or so, now slowly it is from fundamentals where we want to know in depth. Now things are becoming that you have to have a lot of width. So the guys want to have a lot of width, so they want to know how software works, how to click, how to get things done, rather than really understanding what is the equation, why does it come, and so on. So therefore, in these kind of changing circumstances, what exactly one has got to do to keep the interest of the students alive? Of course, there is always a question mark of about the attendance, which is quite often what happens is the people want to ensure that the students attend their classes by invoking what is called an XX or whatever that is. If you don't attend 80%, then you will not be allowed to sit in the examination. So such things generally don't work. So my feeling is, and I have seen some classes where people are just putting their heads down and neither the instructor is bothered. So he said, so long as it's not bothering me, I'm fine with it. So I think these things, to me, I think first thing to be, this is all my personal opinion, so therefore take it as my personal opinion, which is that I think attendance, etc., is not the one to be used to bring audience. In fact, they are, by looking at their eyes and faces, you are actually getting feedbacks. So that should tell you that are you on the right direction or you're on the wrong direction. So you should utilize those, the signals which are coming, rather than trying to have a forced audience. Okay, and point is you have to talk your lecture to the audience. But luckily, being in IIT, the kinds of students who are here are extremely sharp and they are extremely grounded mathematically. And what I have generally noticed is so long as you keep your lectures very coherent, logical, and quantitative, mathematical, the interest is all there. And the more you start talking little qualitatively, certain things which probably have to be done, then the interest starts dwindling. So therefore, to me, when you plan a course, I think even if it is going to be a qualitative, abundant course, I think you have to think ways and means of making it a little more analytical, so that I'm sure in every subject there are analytical methods which you can borrow and mix the two. It works very well. But luckily in engineering, we didn't have any of this problem. So typically my feeling is that you have to have proper course which is well planned so that the audience will like it. And then even if it is analytical, theoretical, eventually, as Milind says, talk about applications. For instance, there is also, and a real life experience is always useful. I think just like Milind said, I suddenly remembered, so he was talking about the collision process. And since when I teach nuclear engineering, I also to talk about moderation where collision process occur. So the best way is, for example, there is what is called your grazing collision, where there is hardly any energy which is transferred and you have a head-on collision. So the example for grazing collision is when we cross our IIT roads where the autos are going and they just slide past you. So that is actually the grazing collision. So therefore you can, head-on collision, of course, everybody knows. And for example, you go and hit on a mountain, obviously the mountain is not going to move, you are going to get your energy back. So these examples definitely help. Now the question is, when you are teaching mathematical courses like fluid mechanics, heat transfer, etc., now whether you should use the board or you should use the PowerPoint, or what's the right way of doing it. As Milind says, PowerPoint is a very powerful tool. But quite often, what tends to happen, if you don't mix it up, then the students start sleeping. So therefore, how to exactly keep the fellows alive? So towards this, you have to have a combination of PowerPoint, board, and some questions for the sleepy guy. Ask, okay, what is that, so that he at least wakes up, he says something. So you have to be constantly on the lookout who is, see, because the fellow doesn't sleep immediately, you can already see he's not seeing in your eye, so you can figure out that the fellow is not. So you have to be in live with the audience so that you are sure that the fellow is looking at it. You will already know, hey, you are trying to sleep, either you go drink some water and come back, or okay, what is this question? So you can keep these guys alive. So the bottom line, as I see, is you have to be alive with the audience all the time. Another thing which I do in my coursework is that the course syllabus is already known. See, quite often what I have found is the syllabus contains N. There are always funny arguments in IIT Bombay which is being made. See, the course syllabus are normally made with a lot of thought, saying that this must be taught. That's the quantum. And now you keep going, and the way you want, you keep going. Finally, you find only 80% is covered, then you leave the 20%. And you say, what's the big deal, IIT guys? Why? What is the idea? I think they can pick up whatever they want, etc. I don't believe in that. The way, at least I have been taught in Purdue, is on the day I go there, I have the entire timetable for the semester. Lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, lecture 4, lecture N, mid-sem, quiz, end-sem. The whole plan is given on day 1. And I was quite impressed with that when I went as a student. So I follow it. So I put it in the web. on the day, that is what is the course contents, books, and the number of, I always calculate how many working days, holidays, if it is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I put dates, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, even if it's a holiday, I put it's a holiday. So that the calendar doesn't change Monday, Wednesday, Friday or whatever. So you plan for it and you ensure that everything is distributed properly, and therefore you neither rush nor you are too relaxed. So you are getting feedbacks that, okay, this was the plan, it is not going as per plan, correct yourself, and so on and so forth. That way, what I have found is that you are able to make the entire syllabus fully, and the whole thing goes so that you are able to complete the syllabus rather than leaving. So to me, it is a very helpful tool. PowerPoint is an extremely helpful tool to ensure that you don't go astray. That is, the logical ideas have been put one behind the other. So you will always go a little bit out and talk, but it will bring you back so that you are supposed to talk next this is connected to this is connected to that. So therefore, PowerPoint need not be you just keep putting and reading. That's not the idea. The idea of a PowerPoint, when you animate, that is one sentence come at a time or one equation come at a time. The idea is that you know that, okay, after this, you are supposed to talk that, see how it is connected, and so on. So that is how the PowerPoint is helpful. Even if you are a bored person, it's fine, you have a small PowerPoint, at least to tell you how to go one to the other, rather than take a paper and then keep on writing on the board, and most of the time the fellows are seeing your back. So that also is not very helpful. So therefore, a combination of these will be useful. And now, my belief is just the teaching is not enough. The part of the teaching should also be giving the correct homeworks. That is, you have to ensure that whatever ideas have been taught, you have homeworks which actually add a little more variations to what has been taught. So something that has not been taught is also being compensated or additionalized, that it is given in a homework. So normally what we do is, when the homework is given, we don't solve the homework. We say that, see, the problem number 1 has this idea, this is what is it. In problem number 2, that's the idea. See, there's a slight variation of this, you have to do this. So in about half an hour, we can talk about all the 15 problems which have been given in the assignment. And then appropriately the assignment is done. So therefore, that adds to what they have already done. So I am not a believer of having projects. So there are ideas that people give what is called a term project, where fellows go to different library, get some ideas and get it. I had tried in the beginning when I came. I found that guided problems given, guided papers to be read, if at all, is much more useful, where the transmission of knowledge is much more effective than when you give a term project where 50 fellows have to come and a lot of time is wasted and nothing much is gained. This is my personal view. People may take it, people may not take it. So to me, a good course is one which is well thought out, well delivered, and proper assignments done, so that the person at the end of it, if he has his notes and his homework, I think he knows the subject reasonably well. That's all my thought as far as the course is concerned. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I am not as ordered as Professor Kannan Iyer is, so my ways are surely quite different from what he said. I don't agree with some of the points also. So when Professor Patwardhan asked me to do this, of course, I was thinking about what is that I do. So then I also, talked to few of the students. I asked them to discuss, and they told me what they liked in me. So that also I incorporated. So that's the way I try to, understand what I do in the class. So before I get into that, one thing is I love teaching. Means from my school days, I wanted to become a teacher. So whether it was a school teacher, because then I started doing higher studies, and then, that changed to college, and now I happen to be at IIT Bombay. So I was very clear from my 6th or 7th standard that I wanted to be a teacher, and I'm very passionate about, I really love that profession. And also, of course, I am in a field which is not so popular. Okay, and in the West, etc., that particular field has almost died down. It's iron and steel making, but of course, our country needs a lot of it. But So when I finished my PhD, my supervisor told me, Vishwanathan, make sure that you do good teaching. Because the problem is, I don't know in future what is the prospect of this particular field. So at least you will earn your salary by good teaching. So I remember that advice, and I continued it. Of course, I'm happy that students do like me for other than teaching, also for the research. And IIT Bombay has taken a lot of conscious effort, especially to promote this particular area, because that is good for the country. Anyway, so let me come back to how I conduct uh, in the class. So first of all, I believe in connecting with the students. So fortunately, I never get angry, at least with the students in the class. I never get angry. Sometimes I do act angry for purpose, but I never get angry. The reason for that is I know how mischievous I was when I was student in the class. And still many of my teachers like me for whatever I am. So hence, when I see especially UG students versus PG students, there is a difference in maturity. And I do understand that. Hence, I know that, at least I believe that I have to treat them differently because their age matters. Um, and for example, when I go to a large class and I look for those students who are mischievous or trying to do something which they are not supposed to do, of course, in a 120 large class, it becomes very difficult to remember. But what I do is I note their face, go back immediately, go to the ASC site, remember the name, and I make sure that I call their names in the next class. So that way they get a feel that, okay, this particular man knows, the names. So I try to do this, and that way I make them aware that I'm watching, whatever they do. Um, then the other thing is this I borrowed from Professor Balal. He keeps telling many times that, one needs to be shameless to learn. So I keep repeating this to the students. So I make sure that I never ridicule, I try my best to ridicule any question from a student. Either quite often, whether it is in the class or outside the classroom, I really get high when students ask questions. I become very, involved in that, and it really gives me a lot of pleasure. Of course, in sometimes some student may take it in a direction where the others may not appreciate in the class. So at that time, I tell them that, okay, let us take it, after the class. That kind of a thing I do. The other thing is, even in the classroom or outside, when there is discussion is taking place, I consciously try not to overpower with my arguments, because that also I feel that it makes them go away from you. So I purposefully do that so that they become more comfortable. So this I try to do it consciously. And on the other hand, if I don't know the answer, I say it in the class that I do not know the answer, and I will share it with you, find out the answer in the next class, and I do it meticulously to make sure that those questions are answered in the next class. Then, as I told you, I treat UG and PG students differently. I believe in their age or considering their age. So some enforcement in attendance, which I disagree with Sir Gandanayar. There is some enforcement I believe is needed when it comes to UG students. So, for example, even if they come late, I mark, for example, 3 late, I mark them as 1 absent. But when it comes to PG students, I don't take attendance because I consider them as more mature. But incidentally, every time I get a feedback from those students who are attending the class, sir, you should have taken the attendance from the beginning, because that would have made us attend the classes more regularly. So you should take attendance. Even now, every time I get that feedback, even from PG students. So this is as far as how I conduct the class. Of course, see, at the end, the effective teaching depends on the characteristic of the person who teaches. and the students, what is their intent, or are they ready to receive whatever is being told, because again that depends on that, and the content itself. So depending on that, the way of teaching or the way of delivery has to change. So I do teach, for example, two courses. One is transport phenomena, which is very close to heat transfer, fluid flow, same thing. It's a very well structured course. Okay, so in some sense, it's very easy to this. I believe it's easy to uh, teach such a course. But on the other hand, another course is iron and steel making, or it's more technology oriented course, where I feel the challenges is much more to keep the student interest alive. Um, Fortunately, my experience with UG teaching on this course is quite limited, so I won't be able to comment on that. But on the PG students, this particular course, I have been involved. So, and there I have a lot of students who are coming from industry, and they already know the process. So hence, along with that, there are regular students. So the whole class ambience, it's a smaller class, maybe 30, or 20 to 30. The whole ambience is different. So there I conduct, or the way I deliver content is different from what I do in a large UG class. When it comes to, so, Professor Kannanayer was also talking about mathematics. I somehow feel mathematics is something, they learn it somewhere else. Quite often they are comfortable. I believe the their problem is quite often, the real life problems, when they actually look at the real world, and then they have something which they know already. Connecting this is a issue. Okay? So I try to spend a lot of time taking examples, real or industrial or whatever it is, try to connect it. Of course, this has some subjectivity. I keep telling them also that there is a subjectivity on how you look at things, because at the end you want to connect with what you have learned or what you know to what the real system is. So there is a subjectivity, and this subjectivity can again change from student to student, because depending on how the student looks at it. So this fact also I try to tell them, and I appreciate that if it is there in the answer book, etc. I do appreciate these things. And the other thing which I believe is, students quite often fail to observe things which is happening very carefully, observe things which is happening around us. So, every class I try to tell one thing which is, especially, when it happens during monsoon season, since I'm taking fluid dynamics, I keep telling them, for example, if you open the tap, water falls on the floor, have you observed what it is? And let me tell you, it takes at least 5 classes to actually come about to actually describe what is happening. There is a hydraulic jump, the water jumps and all those things. They have not really observed. So, I tell them again, you go back, you observe it again. So it takes actually 5, 6 classes to actually come out, because quite often they fail to observe or they don't look at it carefully. So this is again, I try to do it through different examples, so that observation skills are that is also something which I feel should be done. So I try to do it very consciously. Then when it comes to UG courses, I conduct tutorials. All tutorials are conducted without fail. I believe that's a very important session where I can interact with the students. Not only me, rather I make sure that the TAs are well trained. Rather, before the course starts itself, well in advance, I also select my TAs. I tell the department that I need these TAs, and make sure that they know the subject, and train those TAs, and they really help me in conducting the tutorials, and that tutorial really gives the feedback of how the whatever has been taught in the class has happening. And also I make them in a group of 2, that is randomly done, and so that there is some discussion among themselves and all those things. This have been quite effective. This is again, this suggestion had come from students themselves when I started teaching at the beginning, and that I found it is quite effective in getting the feedback from the students on what they have understood and what they have not understood. And when it comes to PG students also, though tutorial is not compulsory, but I know that their ability to solve problems are, because they are from colleges where these things are probably not done very well. So I can make sure that me or TA conduct an extra session that is voluntary to solve problems. So that also, and quite often many students, 80% of them attend this as a part of the course itself. So in a way, Professor Ballal tells me that I am actually giving it means I'm overdoing. I mean, they are supposed to get 6 credit, but I'm doing an 8 credit course. That's what he keeps talking about. When it comes to technology courses, it becomes more challenging. But as I told you, since I know I've been fortunate to have students who are already know the importance of it, that makes a lot of difference in the class. So I try to ask questions, or try to generate some discussion in the class, asking some question, poking especially those who are from the plant. And then through that I try to, for example, 1 or 2 classes I do it, and the third class I try to slowly bring them to the science part of, systemization of all those things, and there is a theory behind it. So 2-3 classes I do it, then by the third class or something, I will try to summarize what this has been done. So this makes, such courses, especially if you are motivated students, it makes things more interesting. And of course, I don't believe in Professor Khandanayer, who said that, whatever has to be there in the syllabus, it has to be done. Quite often I don't finish it. Uh, Especially in these kinds of courses, it becomes very difficult to finish. Even in the other courses, I don't finish it completely, but I believe whatever is done, it should be done well rather than completing the whole thing. That's what I believe. And the other thing is, again, when it goes to the class, if you, this is again, this is not my statement, but I think it has come through Professor Ballal, or he has got it from somewhere else. Too much preparation is also not good. Some amount of extempore, or sometimes it happens also that I wanted to do this for this class, but quite often the questions are, it takes in a different direction, that whatever I wanted to cover, it is not at all there, something else would have covered. This also happened. But so too much preparation also, that is what the advice, which I think is true, is also not good, because there will be some amount of suspense, or uncertainty which should be there, which is what make something interesting for the students. Yeah, that's all I have comments. Yeah.
So good afternoon, and let me share with you a few pointed ideas, which since I am the last panelist, and I also need to kind of talk about the orthogonal complement of what has been said so far to some extent. And I was just trying to recall a few things that I've done recently. And by the way, I agree with almost all my colleagues. First, let me congratulate all colleagues who received this award. And I would agree with all my colleagues that each of our teaching processes evolves in time. IIT itself has evolved, and our teaching processes has evolved. So one of our colleagues who said that one of the first prerequisites to make teaching effective is to give importance to teaching. And here I wish to share with you something that has always, kind of sometimes bothered me and sometimes intrigued me. I didn't mention this when I received the award, but there's a particular reason why I cherish this award being named after Professor Sukhatme. Professor Sukhatme was the director just around the time when I joined. So, I joined, Professor Nag appointed me formally, and Professor Nag handed over to Professor Sukhatme. I remember in one of the first meetings which Professor Sukhatme conducted, he said, from now on, all that will count as far as faculty promotion goes is research. Now, while that was probably to be expected given the way IIT was evolving,
I was sharing with some colleagues that this to me came as a shock. Because I said, I had joined IIT because I wanted to do both teaching and research. I just didn't want to do simply research. I could have joined DRDO or some other place to do simply research. So I joined IIT because I wanted to do both teaching and research. So if teaching was not going to count, then half of the work that I did was probably going to go in vain. And in fact, to me, it seemed that research sprung from teaching. I could never think of research without teaching, and vice versa. I couldn't think of teaching without research. So two seem to be so intimately connected that letting only one of them govern one's progress seemed to be unpalatable to me. But then it also happened that Professor Sukhatme took the initiative to initiate these awards, these Excellence in Teaching Awards, and I was fortunate to receive them one stage. So that assured me that teaching had a place in IIT. So, so what I'm trying to say is that the first thing that I found was important in making me an effective teacher is to give importance to teaching. Now, coming to the things that have been challenges in my career in teaching and how I've dealt with them. Of course, one challenge is always to deal with student interest. So fortunately, the subjects that I've been teaching most of the time have, there's a lot of analytical content, there's a lot of reasoning involved, there are a lot of questions to be answered. Students can, go deep, so to speak, and probe. So that aspect is already inherently there in the subjects that I teach, and fortunately, in the electrical engineering department, typically we get students who are keen to learn such things. So, the subjects which I've been teaching are not subjects to which students are averse. So in a way, I've been fortunate. I should confess that, maybe if I were to teach subjects where students were averse, I would have a hard time. Even so, it's not that every student is amenable to a subject. You would find in a class that there is a plethora, there is one group of students which is very keen to learn new ideas, which is very keen to probe, to go deep. And there's another class of students who just wants to get by. And as somebody said, think of the maximum salary and, just get through whatever one needs to do to get a degree. And then anything more is really a bane. So how do you deal with this diversity? Then there is this diversity which comes from the way students respond to teaching. So some people respond to teaching very well when they come to an examination. So you set an examination, you set difficult questions, and you have this group of students who are, I'm the superlative in answering difficult questions. And let me share with you one extreme case. When I started my first undergraduate class that I taught, I had this student who, I think I discovered the student in the semester end examination. So I never knew he was in my class. He came to the semester end examination and he sat, and I was puzzled, it turned out that he was actually registered for the course. And believe it or not, this student scored the highest marks in semester end examination without having sat. Now this was, I don't know how to take it. Either you say that this person was, extraordinary, or you say that my teaching was not required. So, now whatever way you interpret it, this would not have been true for some of the other students in the class. I'm sure if they had behaved like the way this... Now, by the way, I won't take names, but the student happens to be a faculty member in one of the reputed institutions today. But that doesn't mean that, every student who misses class throughout a semester becomes a faculty member. So I'm just saying, there is this diversity. There are some people who, can be quite negligent in their studies all over the semester and perform in a superlative way in an examination. On the other hand, there are other students who are very regular, very conscientious in the class, and who unfortunately don't do well in examinations. Not because they're not capable, because some of them get flustered. Some of them are different thinkers. They tend to think out offline, or whatever you might call it. They don't either they don't believe in thinking, under pressure, or they don't do it very well, or whatever. And this has been a puzzle to me. How do you recognize and appreciate the student who has been with you in the class all the semester and participated, and yet not done well in examination, and the student who turns up at the time of semester and examination gets the highest, and then, so how do you deal with this diversity, and how do you reward the student who is consistent? So, I used to do different things. At one point, of course, one simple thing is, you have exercises for class participation, you credit them and so on. Now, the interesting thing was, when you credit students for class participation, even these students who otherwise vie for marks in examination tend to dominate there, because they can always quickly solve problems and put them up. However, what I noticed is that students who are exam optimal are not necessarily very consistent when things are left to them. So so I'll share with you what I mean. This is puzzling, So what it means is, if this is not really going, if I do this much, I'll do very well, but I don't really need to do much more to do very well. That's what I mean by exam optimal. That is where you need to catch the student who is not just exam optimal. So I tried one strategy. I said, we'll have several different ways of awarding marks for class participation. They could be solving problems, they could be, answering things in the class. Even some class tests, we'll count just a few of them, but we'll also add up all the other marks which are not counted, and we'll all count them towards a class participation score, which could be anything, it could be as large as you desire. And then I did different things with, so that means I'm just giving you an example. Suppose you have a total 100 mark score over the semester, and you have assigned 50 marks to semester end examination, let's say, just as an example, 30 marks to the mid-semester, or maybe 20 marks to mid-semester examination, and 30 marks for whatever, in semester class tests and assignments and everything. So you could say, what I said was that, I'll calculate, so in the class participation component, you could get marks anywhere even much above 30. So you could get 100 marks for class participation, but then if you exceed 30, then it is saturated to 30. So then I calculate a saturated score out of 100. And then I award a grade based on that. But then the first time I did this, I said, well, awarding a grade always has borderlines. So whenever there are borderlines, I look at the unsaturated score also. So I'll decide between the two grades on the border based on what the class participation was. Now, the first time I did this, it worked to some extent, but the overhead was very complicated, because how do you decide, what is the crossing mark or whatever between on borderline? So this took care of the borderline issue to some extent, and it also made students aware that there is a reason to do more class participation. But then, this issue is there. How exactly do you factor it in? How exactly do you take the additional class participation? The second time I did this, I said, well, I'll do something different. I'll calculate 2 scores for each student. So I'll have a saturated score where the class participation score is saturated to 30. And I have an unsaturated score where I just add the marks with class participation without a limit. So that person could have got 500 marks or whatever. I'll do a grading based on the unsaturated score, and I'll do a grading based on the saturated score. So for each student, he has 2 grades. And then I award the better of the 2 grades to the student. Now, this seemed to work well. In fact, I saw that some students who, the exam optimal kinds, of course, got their grades. But even the non-exam optimal people also got grades here. And I don't blame the exam optimal people, but here what happened was that I could be a little more tough. In fact, so I did this once, and I found that, again, the exam optimal people were kind of dominating. So then what I did once, of course, that was only a one-time, effort, was I was very harsh with the saturated score. So on the saturated score, I graded very harshly. And on the unsaturated score, I was a little more liberal. So then, this went around as a word. And the next time I taught the course, when I announced I'm just sharing with you how the psychology works, the student psychology. So when I started teaching the course, I announced that, we would have these opportunities for class participation. And the moment I announced the thing on the first day you had 40 people putting up solutions on Moodle. And then the students complained that, see, we heard that last time it was not really the saturated score that mattered, it was the unsaturated score that mattered. So now all of us are vying for the unsaturated score. So, you see, what I'm trying to say is we are also in an environment here in IIT where there is a hyper-competitive tendency. There is a tendency to want to do whatever is required to reach that top, and do it, come what may. So then I had now to think of ways of curbing too much of participation just for marks. So you keep having these new problems. So so the student said, see, I mean, apparently I said, you can post your solutions on Moodle up to a certain time. So you found that the moment the time began, within 5 minutes you had 40 posts, and so they said, if I don't get that 5-minute window, I'm not getting the mark. So I said, I agree. I don't want somebody to lose or gain marks because he's meeting a 5-minute window. So how do you deal with that? So anyway, I've also found a way to deal with that. But what I'm trying to say is that the challenges that come up, even when you're dealing with this dilemma, are not very straightforward. And in a way, that's a good problem to have. And that's because our students want to perform well. So, they either they want to perform well in terms of grades, or they want to prove that they are participating well. So one of the challenges when you're dealing with a class like this, where students really want to perform well, you also have to be able to extract the best out of them without just letting them be mercenary, quote unquote. I haven't a final answer for it, but these are some of the things I've tried. They've been evolving, and I hope they do better in future. I'd like to briefly share with you some of the other thoughts that I had about challenges. I've noted them here. I have noticed, with the size of classes increasing, an increasing teacher-student disconnect. I felt this particularly when we have reached the current class size. I mean, even maybe 10 years ago, when our class sizes were reaching 70, I didn't feel that disconnect so strongly. But now, with the class size being 130, I must confess that I have not really known all the students in the class. So I probably don't know all the 130 names, or even if I know them at some point in time, I forget them by the time I go to the next semester. So that student-teacher disconnect, I feel, has been manifesting on various fronts, including in the teaching learning process. I find it manifesting, for example, when, as some of my colleagues said, there is a distraction in the class and you don't notice it, and these distracting students distract others. So that is one level of disconnect. The other level of disconnect which I find is that students don't want to take up that additional effort to go beyond what is only required in a syllabus. So if I tell them, well, this is, you can do this in addition to what I'm doing in the class, unless it's for marks or unless it's for some incentive, there are not too many people who would want to do it. Sometimes I attribute this to the teacher-student disconnect. If there were a better teacher-student connect, I think that incentivization every time may not be needed. So I feel this needs to be addressed at a fundamental level. I've been trying to do it. I did something in one course which I want to share with you. It's a very peculiar, it's just a flash of thought which I got, and I tried it out, and it had some interesting results. I gave them something called an interaction assignment. This was because this was not more for teacher-student disconnect. This was because I thought that students didn't really know their own strengths. And because they didn't know their own strengths, and because they didn't know that other people around them also had strengths which they could explore, and there was a feeling of wanting to only compete and only wanting to perform one's best without wanting to learn together. So competition versus cooperation. So I told them, in a large class, this only has a meaning in a large class, like 130. I told them, go to 10 students whom you don't know very well, and identify one strength of each of those 10 students, and write that down. And this is all, I of course gave it class participation, marks, additional marks if they did it. I said, don't do it if you're not sincere about it. If you're sincere about it, do it, and you will earn your class participation marks for it. I mean, it was a very, very peculiar experiment I did. And I said, it's not compulsory. And I said, I was just trying to see how many students actually did it and did it well. So in a class of 130, I was surprised to see that nearly 90 students actually did this. So they needn't have done it actually. They could have earned their saturated score. And what was more interesting, I also asked them to write down, of course, the 10 strengths, 10 people and their one strength. I also asked them to write down what they experienced when doing this. And believe me, many of them actually said that this opened up something within. So Why was this important? Because this made a difference to the way they saw the whole classroom below, the whole classroom environment. And so in a very peculiar way, I found this satisfied a deeper issue which I thought was, raging in our system. And that is, when you have a very large class, there is a section of students which feels disconnected from the whole, from the consciousness of the class, if you know what I mean. So this seemed to, at least I thought it seemed to connect them to that consciousness, and it seemed to bring them into the mainstream in some small way if possible. And I've been trying this and I've been experimenting with it. But I do believe that these forms of connect are important, the subtle aspect of the classroom environment. Finally, I must share with you something that actually shocked me even this semester. I mean, it's not new, but the use of unfair means. So recently I found that, there is a possibility that some of the students have probably, written things on the script after the script was written and returned it for review of marks, which means that they're claiming marks for things which have been written after the examination. Now, of course, there's a system of, reward and punishment and all that, that's a different thing. But I was trying to reason with the students that this is probably something, in a way, what needs to become, one can see punishment is at one level. So, you're doing something wrong, this is not done, this is not accepted in the system. But there are always, in an intelligent class, there is always this question, why is this not accepted in the system? There have been social reformers when norms change, laws change. Why don't we accept this in a system? So this question of how to convince a student that what really matters is that you prove to yourself and you don't deceive yourself is the most important. You see, you can make laws. Don't bring your mobile, don't look at whatever crib sheets if it's not allowed. Those are, so, the question in an intelligent student's mind in IIT is typically, why are these laws there? If I can get around by disobeying these laws, am I doing the right thing? And that question needs to be answered, in my opinion. I've sometimes shared with them, I won't take names again, but I've sometimes shared with them the stories of some of the IIT students whom I know, who were very successful, but later committed what was on the lines of a small crime, and thereby also brought their success almost, at least, brought down their level of success just because that samskara was there. That, that I don't have a better word for it. In the Indian languages, use the word samskar. That thing was ingrained in their consciousness and it manifested at some other time. So I sometimes tell students that, it is important that you don't build on such samskaras, because they will carry you, they will suddenly manifest at a time and they will cost you very dearly when, you're otherwise very successful. So this issue of dealing with unfair means has puzzled me. I feel it needs to be dealt with by explaining to the student that somewhere this will get past you, even if you miss it now. Anyway, I'm very grateful to all of you for listening through, and thank you so much.